I'm just gonna start reading from a book I would like to read to you, and that's it. Bella, come here. Come on. This will last. Alright, starts at 5 minutes, alright, basically. Not another preface. Oh. That's alright. Well, I guess I'll read the preface. Alright, it starts at about 6. And astrologers sometimes make mistakes. From this fact, which even they are scarcely sufficiently brazen to dispute, it follows with mathematical certainty that astrology is not a science but a sham, a quackery and a fraud. Contrast its shameful uncertainty with medicine, where no doctor ever lost a patient, with law, where no lawyer ever lost a case, or even with arms, where no soldier ever lost a battle. It is true that 9 times out of 10, an astrologer glancing at a stranger can tell at what hour of the day he was born. This must be guesswork, for we do not see how it is done or can be done. It is an obvious canon of all sound philosophy that unless we know exactly how things happen, we must deny that they do happen, or if even philosophy cannot so far close eyes on actuality, we must ascribe them to chance. Thought of this altitudinous brilliance is the guarantee of human progress. It reminds one of the sun rising over the crest of some mighty pyramid or rock and ice, crowned with the everlasting snows. True it is that in all cases an astrologer in the front rank of his profession gives good advice, kind, shrewd, disinterested, and worldly advice, yet inspired by diviner wisdom that, as he spends his life in the contemplation of the noblest phenomena of nature, the soul behind them cannot but operate to bestow. True it is also that any astrologer of eminence can point to hundreds of people whose life, honor, and property have been preserved through his advice. But what do these facts prove? What are we to think of any man who does not earn his living honestly by gambling on Wall Street, or faking antique furniture, or adulterating the food of the people, or wrecking railroads, or manufacturing the instruments of war? Why, the fellow is a cheat, a scoundrel. The idle wretch polishes off his daily evil in 8 hours to squander the remaining 6 in hideous debauch of sleep. What is to be done, thank God, degenerate as our age may be in some respects? We have a fairly efficient police system. Well then, send a detective to the astrologer. Let her go in with her eyes red with tears. Let her rock with sobbing as she tells of how her only child lies dying, and all the doctors have given up hope. Perhaps the astrologer, for all the knavery and cunning which enable him to pick the pockets of so many thousand people, may be fool enough to utter a few words of comfort. Then the matter is simple. Justice can be done. The police take action, and fine or imprisonment follow. The detective is complimented on this cleverness of her plans. Her salary is raised, and a free people march ever onwards, singing in the sunlight towards that city which is God. The age is too meanly-mouthed, too sentimental, too easygoing to deal radically with crime. Even murderers nowadays have a good chance of escaping the electric chair, and the astrologer is worse than the murderer, for he touches not the mere vile body, but the pocket. We cannot avoid death, but we can die rich. There is even an added blasphemy in the crime of the astrologer, for we know of what awful benefit, being a name too sacred to utter lightly, the dollar is the incarnation. Yet pause, there may be a good reason for the tenderness of the law towards the astrology. It is so certain that any community can destroy its helpless members, especially when they are women, by hanging them or burning them, and certain communities have had a splendid record and a long experience of witch baiting. Statesmanship has abandoned these methods for others less effective on the surface. It argues some wiser considerations, some subtler motive, some nobler and loftier plan for the uplifting of the human race than the unthinking mind can grasp. But let us put ourselves in the position of the patriotic statesman. Here we sit, the broad and noble forehead corrugated in the agony of intense thought, the firm chin resting on the hand, and the venerable beard quivering with emotions less human than divine. We brood upon the true, the beautiful. From time to time we sigh, as we think of the incommensurable, the absolute, or the greatest good. We gaze from fearless and untroubled eyes upon the world, and the words, half-formed, die in godlike sorrow upon our lips. Alas, humanity! And as we reflect, there comes to us the burning conviction that money is not an unmixed blessing. Prosperity tends to sap the morality of the common people. Virtue flourishes in communities of simple manners and fades when luxury spreads her vampire wings. Money may be a curse. We realize that many people do not use it wisely. They would be better off without it. For example, the class that squanders its hard-earned dollars upon the wicked astrologer. For it is not well either that the astrologer should have it. The desire of it has already led him into crime. The obtaining of it has confirmed him in that offense against the laws of God and man. Yet to suppress the astrologer, the first rash, noble impulse of indignation still leaves the money in the hands of the people, who are no doubt better off without it. A dilemma indeed. Has political wisdom no solution? A light draws in the eyes. The brow relaxes its tension. The beatific smile hovers, dove-like on those firm, calm lips. I will not oppress the astrologer. So the great idea takes shape in glory of speech. I will merely introduce a bill to oppress him. Then I will advise him privately that I am his true friend, and that for just a few $1,000s I can prevent that bill from passing into law. If he cannot understand the merits of this plan, and his brain has probably been stupefied by his devotion to his foolish quackery, which in no doubt, poor creature, he has a sincere belief, then I will prosecute him once or twice under the old mild law and get him frightened. Then surely he will yield, and the money will be no longer where it can only do harm, in the pockets of the common people or the wicked astrologer, but where it can only do good, in those of the wise and patriotic statesman. If this plan has sometimes failed to work as it should, it is because the astrologer is too often obstinately impervious to all reason and good sense, as well as manners and good taste. He may even exclaim, malicious as a dog cornered by a gang of street urchins, that on the whole he would rather go to prison. It is not very credible, perhaps, to be at large in a country with such rulers. So deplorable a temper is indicative of incorrigible vice, a perversity of the soul plainly satanic. Such people are dangerous to the state. They may perhaps hit back. Perhaps our sterner forefathers were wise after all. Perhaps we should go after the dollars of the common people in some other way, and deal with the astrologer by reviving the methods of the inevitable Matthew Hopkins. Unless we can do so, and there is some danger in those contemplatable creatures, the uncommon people, or the common people, might not readily acquiesce. It is to be feared that we shall see the ruin of civilization with its greatest glory, our unique political system, and become impotent witnesses of that catastrophe, the triumph of astrology. Okay, so the physical constitution of the universe is the basis of the science of astrology, and in order to explain from what principles we deduce our judgments of its movements, we must endeavor to gain a clear idea of the nature of those movements. Many people have the idea that the solar system is more or less spherical in shape. It is not the case. It is, roughly speaking, a flat disk. It whirls in one plane. The planets depart slightly from this plane, but only slightly. How this state of affairs came to be has long been the problem of astronomy. It is not yet satisfactorily settled, but the general idea is that there was at one time, we do not know why or how, an enormous flaming mass revolving in space. In course of time, certain heavier portions, collected together by the force of gravity, and this mass, being coherent, was flung off, retaining, however, its general movement with regard to space, but having also a revolutionary movement of its own in the same plane. This body, constantly radiating its heat into space, gradually contracted and solidified. This first body was the planet Neptune. The same process repeated itself several times, and thus were formed Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, the asteroids, Mars, the Earth, Venus, Mercury. Many other bodies were formed in precisely the same way, but they lacked the principle of coherence in the same degree, and soon after separating from the sun, themselves broke up into asteroids and meteors, countless millions of which throng interplanetary space. Some of these bodies, moreover, behaved at first like the sun itself and threw off smaller bodies of the class which we call moons. These were very small in comparison to the present orb, cooled quickly, and lost their internal revolutionary movement. The moon of the Earth, for example, though it still revolves around the Earth, no longer turns upon its own axis and always presents to us the same face. The important item in all this is that all these movements, complex as they are, and we have made no attempt to describe that complexity in detail, but merely to give a crude idea, take place in one plane of no great thickness, and in the same main direction. The notes on that one says actually the moon revolves in such a way as to present the same face to Earth, and then the other one was, with the exception of Uranus, whose north-south axis is tilted at 97.9 degrees to the vertical axis of the plane of the solar system. Students of astronomy are well aware of how Neptune was discovered. In calculating the movements of Uranus, certain perturbations were discovered. Perturbations. Okay, well, that's great. Perturbations. Were discovered which could not be accounted for by any of the known planets. Astronomers were therefore led to imagine that there might be some other body yet undiscovered, and probably beyond Uranus. Calculations were then made to determine the probable position of such a body, which was then looked for with extreme care, and ultimately Adams and Leverrier discovered the limits of its possible positions with such accuracy that Gall of Berlin discovered it in 1846. The mathematician, this is the note for that, the mathematicians under Urban Leverrier in France and John Couch Adams in England independently predicted the location of Neptune. They were alive in the 1800s. I'm sorry, that's not what it says. The mathematicians Urbain Le Verrier, 1811 to 1877 in France, and John Couch Adams, 1819 to 1892 in England, independently predicted the location of Neptune. Le Verrier communicated his findings to the German astronomer Johann Gottfried Galle, 1812 to 1910, who first observed Neptune. It is by no means certain that Neptune is the most distant planet. Further observations and calculations show that there are still certain movements of Uranus not fully accounted for by Neptune. And there are also perturbations in Neptune himself, which suggest that there may still be another planet outside Neptune. If so, however, the distance is probably very great indeed. Our reasons for thinking so are based on Bode's law. The notes on that one said Pluto is now considered to be a trans-Neptunian object, NTO, a planetoid or minor planet. At this writing, over 90 TNOs are known, some larger than Pluto's moon Chiron. Many NTOs, like Pluto, have eccentric orbits and periodically bring them within the orbit of Neptune. Students and doctrines will appreciate that Pluto as premium mobile and attributed to Kepler, and is now considered to be one among the unknown total number of NTOs. As the first to be observed and the largest, Pluto will probably always be considered first among peers NTOs. Pluto is the only NTO also classified as a major planet. Its traditional place among the major planets was reconfirmed by the International Astronomical Union in 1999. Further discoveries may cause astronomers to revisit the question of its place among the traditional planets. And number 5 was Bode's law, is also known as Titus-Bode law, as it was first enunciated in 1766 by Johann Daniel Titus, 1729 to 1796 of Wittenberg, but popularized by the director of the Berlin Observatory, Johann Albert Bode, 1747-1826. Bode was a German astronomer who flourished in the last half of the 18th and first quarter of the 19th century, and the law to which he has given his name is as follows. If we take the number 4 and divide it by 10, we get the distance of Mercury from the Sun in astronomical units, the astronomical unit being the mean distance from the Earth to the Sun. Add 4 to 3 and divide it by 10, and we obtain the distance of Venus. Add twice 3 to 4, and we get the distance to Earth. Add twice 3 to 4, and we get the distance of Mars. Add twice 3 to 4, and we get the mean distance of the asteroids. This same proportion continues, multiplying 4 times by 2 and adding it to 4, and then dividing it by 10, we get the mean distance of Jupiter. Multiplying the 3 by 2 once more, we get the distance of Saturn, yet again, and we get that of Uranus. Or stated differently, take the numeric series 0, 3, 6, 12, 24, etc. Add 4 to each, then divide each by 10. The first 6 approximate the planetary distances in astrological units. 1 AU being the distance from the Sun to the Earth, 93 million miles. Bode's law helped locate the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter near 2.8 AU and Uranus at 19 AU. The distance of the 9th planet, Pluto, agrees with Bode's prediction for an 8th near 39 AU. With Neptune, however, the law breaks down. According to that law, the mean distance should be 38.8, whereas it is only 30. No real reason is known for this law, though it is hoped that light may be thrown upon the subject by further researches in celestial mechanics and the evolution of the solar system. The law was at least of this service that it led to this discovery of asteroids, which are supposed to be the fragments of an exploded planet. No satisfactory explanation of the exception of Neptune to this law has been put forth. Now the fixed stars lie about the sun at distances immeasurably greater than even the farthest of the planets. It is impossible for the human mind to form any conception of the magnitude of space. These stars surround the sun completely. There is no part of the heavens in which they are not. But to resume the simile of the wheel, if we look along the spokes of that wheel, we shall perceive a narrow band of stars, and these naturally group themselves into 12 constellations disposed at approximately equal distances. We pay more attention to these stars because they lie in the same plane as the general movement of the solar system, and their influence consequently combines naturally with that of the planets. Their effects have been studied from time immemorial with the utmost care and described by ancient astrologers. To these constellations, names have been also given. They are as follows: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. These names are mostly those of symbolic animals. It is very fanciful to try to see any resemblance of these animals in relative positions of the stars concerned. The names have been given because of the astrological significance thereof, and this is one of the many proofs that astrology is older than astronomy. The materialistic school of philosophy has endeavored to give the impression that we suppress some real knowledge of the nature of the forces which we see at work around us. Such an impression is entirely false. All forces are essentially mysterious. We know from observation, comparison, and measurement how they act. We cannot even form any reasonable conception of their true character. Let us take, for example, the force of gravity. In order to explain its action, men of science have been obliged to postulate the substance called ether.